She had nowhere left to go, until a widowed cowboy found her collapsing in the rain and said, "You need shelter, and maybe I need you." The wind screamed across the open Texas plains, carrying dust and the scent of rain. The sky hung low and heavy, the kind that warned of a coming storm. Clara pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders as she trudged along the dirt road, her shoes worn through, her breath turning to mist in the evening chill. Each step sent pain shooting up her legs, but she couldn't stop. Not now, not when there was nowhere else to go. Her life in town had ended with a single cruel whisper, a lie spread by the wrong man. One mistake, one rumor, and she had been cast out like a stray. No one had opened their doors. No one had cared that she had no food, no place to sleep. Now, half frozen and trembling, she saw the faint glow of a lantern swinging near an old barn in the distance. The light blurred through the tears in her eyes. "Please," she whispered to no one. "Just a place to rest." Her voice was swallowed by the wind. When she finally reached the barn, her strength gave out. She stumbled against the wooden post, her knees hitting the hard ground. A door creaked, and boots crunched on the dirt behind her. "Easy there, ma'am." The voice was deep, steady, with a touch of concern that made her flinch. A pair of strong hands caught her before she collapsed completely. Clara looked up, blinking through the dust. The man standing over her was tall, broad-shouldered, his face lined with quiet strength and grief. His brown hair was flecked with gray, his shirt sleeves rolled up, showing the muscle of a man who worked the land every day of his life. Ethan Cole. She'd heard of him, the widower rancher who'd lost his wife 3 winters ago. Folks in town said he barely spoke anymore, that his heart had gone cold when she died. "I don't want trouble," Clara whispered, trying to pull away, but her legs refused to move. Ethan studied her, his lantern light catching the desperation in her eyes. "Doesn't look like trouble's what you need," he said softly. "You need shelter. Come on now, I've got a warm fire inside." She shook her head weakly. "I can't pay you, and if anyone finds out I'm here." He cut her off with a quiet firmness. "Ain't nobody here but me and my girls. You look like you've had a hard road. That's enough reason for me." Behind him, 2 small faces peeked from the porch of the farmhouse. One girl couldn't have been older than 6, her hair in messy braids. The other clutched a ragged doll to her chest, watching the stranger with cautious curiosity. Clara's heart ached at the sight. Ethan turned slightly, nodding toward the house. "They're Maggie and Rose," he said, his tone softening. "They've been without a mother too long." The words struck something deep in Clara, a mixture of sadness and something else she couldn't name. Why would you help me?" she asked, voice trembling. Ethan's eyes held hers, calm and steady like a quiet storm. "Because sometimes, ma'am, the Lord puts folks in our path for a reason. Maybe you just need a place to rest. Maybe I just need to remember what kindness feels like." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The lantern light flickered between them, painting the air in gold. Then, slowly, Clara nodded. Ethan helped her to her feet, his touch gentle but strong, and led her toward the farmhouse. As she stepped inside, warmth wrapped around her like a blanket, the crackle of firewood, the faint smell of stew simmering on the stove, the sound of little feet running across wooden floors. Clara stood near the doorway, her heart pounding. She didn't belong here, not in this clean, quiet home filled with love and memories. But when she looked at Ethan again, at the man who had offered her shelter without asking who she was or what she'd done, something inside her softened. Maybe, just maybe, this was where her new life could begin. Ethan set the lantern on the table and turned to her. "You can sleep by the fire tonight. We'll talk in the morning." She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Mr. Cole." He paused, giving her a small nod. "Ethan," he corrected gently. "Just Ethan." As he walked away to check on his daughters, Clara sank onto the chair near the fire. The warmth began to thaw her shaking hands, and for the first time in months, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. The smell of biscuits and firewood filled his lonely home again, and for the first time in years, the widower's heart started to remember what love felt like. Morning sunlight spilled softly through the lace curtains, casting warm gold across the wooden floorboards. Clara woke to the faint sounds of laughter from the kitchen, light, innocent laughter that she hadn't heard in what felt like years. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. Then, as she looked around the tidy little room, the memory returned. The widower cowboy, the stormy night, his steady voice offering her shelter. She sat up slowly, her body still sore from the cold and exhaustion. Her old dress hung loosely on her frame, and her hands trembled as she tried to tame her tangled hair. When she caught her reflection in the small mirror by the washstand, she almost didn't recognize herself, pale, tired, but alive. Alive in a home that wasn't hers. The scent of fresh biscuits and coffee drifted through the air. Her stomach growled quietly, reminding her she hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Gathering her courage, she stepped out into the hallway, her bare feet silent on the wood. In the kitchen, Ethan stood by the stove, his sleeves rolled up, stirring something in a cast-iron pot. His two daughters, Maggie and Rose, sat at the table, swinging their little legs as they waited. Maggie noticed Clara first and gasped softly. "Pa, she's up." Ethan turned, his eyes meeting Clara's. For a moment, his face softened with something between relief and quiet admiration. "Mornin', Miss Clara," he said. "Hope you slept well." She hesitated by the doorway, clutching her shawl around her shoulders. "I did, thank you. I didn't mean to oversleep. I can help, if you'll let me." Ethan nodded toward the counter. "There's flour and butter there. Think you could show Maggie how to roll dough? Her ma used to make biscuits, but I never got the hang of it." Clara smiled faintly and crossed the room. Maggie's wide blue eyes followed her every move as Clara tied an apron around her waist. "Here, sweetheart," she said softly. "You sprinkle a little flour like this, so it doesn't stick." Maggie copied her motions, giggling when a cloud of flour puffed into the air. Even Rose, usually shy, crept closer with her doll in hand, curious to see. For the first time since arriving, Clara laughed, a quiet, musical sound that made Ethan's chest tighten unexpectedly. He leaned against the counter, watching her with a thoughtful expression. She moved with grace, her touch gentle but sure, like someone who had spent her life taking care of others. The girls were already drawn to her, as if some part of them sensed the motherly warmth she carried deep inside. When breakfast was ready, Ethan poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs and placed one in front of her. "You didn't have to do all that," he said quietly. Clara looked up, meeting his gaze across the table. "I needed to repay your kindness somehow. I'm not used to being taken in by strangers." He gave a small smile, though his eyes held years of quiet pain. "You're not a stranger anymore." The girls were too busy eating to notice the way their father's voice softened when he spoke to her, or how his eyes lingered just a second longer than they should have. Clara felt the warmth of his gaze, but she also felt the weight of her secret pressing against her chest, the past she couldn't run from, no matter how kind this house felt. When breakfast was done, Ethan showed her the porch. The land stretched endlessly around them, rolling hills, tall grass swaying under the bright sky, the sound of horses from the nearby corral. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said finally, his tone quiet but firm. "No one'll bother you out here." She looked at him, unsure if she should believe such kindness. "You don't even know who I am, Mr. Cole. What if helping me brings you trouble?" Ethan turned toward the open field, his jaw tightening slightly. "I've known trouble before," he said after a moment. "Lost my wife, lost half the men who worked for me, almost lost this ranch. Trouble don't scare me much anymore." He looked back at her, eyes calm and steady. "What scares me is my girls growing up without knowing what love feels like." Clara's heart stilled. "And what about you?" she asked softly. "What do you need?" He didn't answer right away. The wind caught the brim of his hat, lifting it just enough for her to see the faint smile that touched his lips. "Maybe I need someone to remind me how to believe again," he said finally. The words hung between them, fragile and honest. She didn't know how to respond, didn't know how to tell him that she'd forgotten how to believe too. But as the wind swept across the porch and the girls' laughter echoed through the open land, something inside her shifted. For the first time in years, Clara didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. And deep down, she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this place could be more than shelter. It could be a beginning. Rumors spread like wildfire through town, but when they tried to break her again, the cowboy stood between her and the world, and refused to let her fall. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the ranch began to change. The house that had once felt cold and quiet started to breathe again, filled with laughter, the smell of fresh bread, and the rhythm of life returning. Clara's hands brought warmth to every corner. The curtains were washed and mended, the floors gleamed, and the girls began to smile again. Ethan often found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, how she braided Rose's hair, or how she knelt beside Maggie in the garden, teaching her to care for flowers the way she cared for everything else, with patience and heart. It had been a long time since laughter echoed through these walls. Clara had done that, without even meaning to. Still, peace on the plains never lasted long. Whispers from town began to drift up the dirt road like cold smoke. A woman like Clara didn't just disappear quietly from the gossip of small minds. Folks remembered the scandal, the man who'd ruined her name, the rumors that she'd been with him for money. Lies had a way of traveling faster than truth ever could. One afternoon, Ethan rode into town for supplies. He didn't plan on stopping to talk, but the storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Tully, made sure her words found him before he left. "You got that woman up there, don't you?" she asked, her voice sharp, her eyes narrow. "The one who used to work at the saloon. You best be careful, Mr. Cole. Men who take in her kind don't keep good reputations long." Ethan's jaw tightened. He said nothing, just paid for his supplies and left. But as he rode back through the open country, the wind cold against his face, anger burned in his chest. They didn't know her. They didn't see how Rose clung to Clara's skirt when she was scared, or how Maggie giggled when Clara sang them lullabies at night. They didn't see how his home, his heart, had begun to heal. When he reached the ranch, Clara was outside hanging laundry, her sleeves rolled up, her hair blowing softly in the breeze. She looked peaceful, almost radiant against the backdrop of the setting sun. But when she saw Ethan's face, her hands stilled. "They've been talking again, haven't they?" she asked quietly. Ethan dismounted and dropped the reins. "It doesn't matter what they say." "Yes, it does." Her voice trembled, the calm in her eyes breaking. "They'll never let me forget what happened. I told you before, I'm not the kind of woman you should have around your girls." He took a step toward her, his boots crunching in the dirt. "Clara, you've done more good here than anyone in that town ever could." She shook her head, the pain in her heart spilling out in her voice. "You don't understand. You don't know everything I've done." Ethan paused, watching her carefully. The sun had dipped lower, the light turning soft and golden. He reached out, gently lifting her chin until her tear-filled eyes met his. "Maybe not," he said quietly, "but I know who you are now." She blinked, her lips trembling. "And who am I, Ethan?" He smiled faintly, that rough, tired smile of a man who'd carried grief too long. "You're the woman who saved this place. The one who made my girls laugh again. The one who made me remember what home feels like." Her heart ached at his words, torn between gratitude and guilt. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe she could belong here, but the ghosts of her past whispered louder every night. "You're kind, Ethan," she said softly. "Too kind. But kindness doesn't erase the past." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint scent of leather and pine. "No," he said, his voice low and certain. "But it sure as hell can build a future." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and before she could turn away, he reached out and brushed one from her skin with his thumb. The simple touch sent a shiver through her, one that felt both terrifying and safe. "Don't let them break you again," he whispered. "You've already been through enough." For a long moment, they just stood there, two broken souls, caught in the golden light of the setting sun. The wind swept through the valley, carrying with it the scent of rain and the promise of change. Clara wanted to speak, to thank him, to tell him that his words had touched a place in her heart she thought was long dead, but all she could manage was a trembling breath. Ethan gave her hand a gentle squeeze before turning to walk toward the barn, leaving her there beneath the fading sky. As he disappeared into the distance, Clara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart beat strong and fast. For years, shame had been her only companion. But now, for the first time, she felt something stronger rising within her. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be worthy of love again. A violent storm raged across the ranch, and when death came crashing down, the cowboy risked everything to save the woman who had already saved him. The evening sky had turned a bruised purple, heavy clouds rolling in from the west. The air felt thick, humming with the electricity of an approaching storm. Clara was finishing up chores in the barn, the girls already tucked safely inside, when she noticed the horses growing restless. Their ears flicked, their hooves stamped nervously. She knew that sound. Thunder wasn't far off. Ethan was out near the pasture, fixing the fence line before the weather broke. Clara grabbed her shawl and hurried through the tall grass, calling his name over the wind. "Ethan, you should come in. It's not safe out here." He looked up from where he was tightening a wire, rain already spitting against his hat brim. "Just a few more nails," he shouted back. "Don't want the cattle getting loose if the storm hits hard." Lightning cracked in the distance, the sound rumbling through the valley. The wind picked up, fierce and cold, whipping Clara's hair across her face. She started toward him again, her boots sinking into the mud. "Please, Ethan," she cried, "it can wait till morning." He looked at her then, and something in her tone must have reached him. He dropped his tools, grabbing the coil of wire and slinging it over his shoulder. "All right," he called, moving toward her, but before he reached her, a sharp gust tore through the fields, ripping part of the old barn roof loose. The roar of thunder drowned out everything. Clara gasped as she saw the heavy wooden beam above the door shift and crack. "Ethan," she screamed, pointing. He turned just as the beam gave way. Without thinking, he lunged toward her, shoving her out of the way. The world exploded in noise, wood splintering, wind howling, rain crashing down. Clara hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from her chest. When she opened her eyes, Ethan was lying beside her, half covered by the fallen beam. "No," she cried, crawling to him. "Ethan, no, no, no." She pressed her trembling hands to his chest, relief flooding through her when she felt the faint, steady rhythm of his heartbeat. He gritted his teeth, trying to push the beam off. "Just a scratch," he muttered, his voice tight with pain. "Don't move," she pleaded, tears blurring her vision. The rain poured down harder now, soaking them both to the bone. With all the strength she had left, Clara braced her shoulder under the beam and pushed. It wouldn't budge. Her arms shook, her knees sinking deeper into the mud. "God, please," she whispered desperately, "don't take him too." Something primal burst inside her, fear, love, determination all at once. With a cry, she shoved again, her whole body trembling. The beam rolled just enough for Ethan to pull free. He coughed, wincing, then tried to sit up. "Guess I should have listened to you," he rasped. Clara let out a strangled laugh through her tears. "You're a fool, Ethan Cole." "Maybe," he said weakly, his hand finding hers. His skin was cold, his grip unsteady. "But I'd rather be a fool than see you hurt." She looked down at him, her heart pounding. "You could have died," she whispered. His eyes met hers, calm even through the pain. "Could have, but if I did, I'd die knowing I saved the only good thing that's come to this ranch in a long time." The thunder rolled again, softer now as the storm began to pass. Clara brushed the wet hair from his forehead, tears mixing with the rain. "Don't you say that," she murmured. "You can't leave me, not now." He smiled faintly, his voice low but sure. "Then you'll have to stick around." "Make sure I don't." She laughed through her tears, shaking her head. "You shouldn't be talking." "Maybe," he whispered, gripping her hand tighter. "But there's something I've been meaning to ask, before I run out of luck." She frowned, brushing the mud from his cheek. "Ethan, please, save your strength." He cut her off with a slow breath. "Clara, I need a mother for my girls. And you need shelter. But it's more than that now." His eyes softened, his words trembling with honesty. "You've given life back to this place. To me. So I'm askin', will you stay? Will you be my wife?" For a heartbeat, the world was silent except for the soft patter of rain. Clara's lips parted, her heart twisting painfully. "Ethan," she whispered, "you don't know what you're asking. You deserve someone better, someone clean." He reached up, his thumb brushing the side of her face. "Darlin', I don't need perfect. I just need you." The words broke something inside her. All the walls she'd built to protect herself crumbled in that one moment. She bowed her head, pressing her forehead against his. "Yes," she breathed, her voice shaking. "Yes, Ethan, I'll stay." He smiled then. Tired, relieved, but real. The kind of smile she hadn't seen on him before. "Good," he whispered. "Knew you would." The rain began to ease, turning into a soft drizzle. She helped him to his feet, his arm heavy over her shoulder as they walked back toward the farmhouse. The windows glowed warm against the gray sky, and inside, the faint sound of the girl's laughter floated through the door. As they stepped inside, dripping wet and breathless, Clara looked at Ethan, at the man who had risked his life to save her, and felt something bloom deep in her heart. For the first time, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt like she'd come home. At sunrise, with laughter in the air and love in his eyes, the widower took her hand and whispered, "Welcome home, Mrs. Cole." The storm had passed, leaving the land washed clean beneath a pale, golden dawn. The air smelled of wet earth and cedar, and the sky stretched clear above the hills, soft streaks of pink and silver painting the horizon. The ranch seemed still, almost sacred, as if the world itself were holding its breath after the night's fury. Clara stood on the porch wrapped in one of Ethan's old blankets, watching the mist lift off the fields. Her hair was still damp, curling loosely around her face, and though her body ached from exhaustion, her heart felt strangely light. Inside the house, she could hear the quiet murmur of Ethan's voice as he spoke to the girls. It was a sound she had come to love, the deep, steady tone of a man built from both strength and kindness. A moment later, the door creaked open behind her. Ethan stepped out, his arm bound in a makeshift sling, his shirt freshly cleaned but still torn at the shoulder. The morning light caught the sharp lines of his face, softening them, and for the first time since she'd met him, Clara saw peace there. "You shouldn't be up," she said gently, turning toward him. He gave a crooked smile. "Could say the same to you. But I reckon neither of us are good at restin'." She laughed quietly, a soft sound that carried across the still air. "You scared me last night, Ethan. I thought." She stopped, unable to finish. He stepped closer, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek with his good hand. "I know," he said softly. "Didn't mean to. Guess I've always been better at fixin' fences than lookin' after myself." Clara's eyes shimmered. "You could have been killed." His gaze lingered on her, steady and warm. "Maybe, but I'd do it again." They stood in silence for a long moment, listening to the faint chirp of birds waking in the trees. Then, from inside, a small voice called, "Pa, Miss Clara, come see the baby horse." Ethan chuckled, his eyes lighting up. That colt came just before the storm. Maggie's been dyin' to show him off. Clara followed him down the steps and across the dewy grass to the small paddock. Maggie and Rose were kneeling beside the fence, their hands reaching out to the wobbly-legged foal standing close to its mother. The girls looked up as they approached, grinning ear to ear. "He's all right, Pa. He made it through the storm," Rose said proudly. "That he did," Ethan said, resting his good hand on her head. "Strong little fella." Clara crouched beside Maggie, running her fingers gently along the colt's soft nose. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "Just like you," Ethan murmured behind her, and when she turned, he smiled that slow, disarming smile of his. The girls, oblivious to the tender moment, began debating names for the horse. Clara listened, laughing as they argued between Thunder and Sugarfoot. But when Ethan reached out and quietly took her hand, her laughter faltered. His fingers intertwined with hers, warm and rough, and she felt a rush of emotion so deep it made her chest ache. He waited until the girls were distracted before speaking, his voice low. "You sure about what you said last night?" Clara looked up at him, her heart fluttering. "I meant every word," he exhaled, something unspoken easing in his shoulders. "Then I guess we've got ourselves a family." Her eyes glistened, tears threatening to spill. "You're not afraid of what people will say?" Ethan shook his head, his thumb tracing slow circles on her hand. "Let 'em talk. They always will, but they don't live here. They don't see how you make this place whole." She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "I never thought I'd belong anywhere again." He smiled softly. "You do now." The girls came running then, wrapping their small arms around Clara's waist. "Can we make biscuits again today, Miss Clara?" Maggie asked eagerly. Clara laughed, hugging them both. "Only if you help." "We will," Rose chirped, already pulling her toward the house. Ethan stood back for a moment, watching them, Clara and the girls walking hand in hand toward the porch, the morning sun spilling across the yard. For years, his home had been filled with silence and ghosts. Now, it was alive again, filled with laughter and warmth. Clara turned halfway up the steps, her eyes meeting his. "You coming, Mr. Cole?" she teased gently. He smiled, tipping his hat. "It's Ethan, remember?" She laughed softly, the sound carrying through the bright morning air. As he joined her on the porch, the girls ran ahead, already chattering about names for the colt and what to bake for supper. Ethan slipped his arm around Clara's shoulders, pulling her close. "You sure you want to marry a stubborn old cowboy?" he asked quietly. She looked up at him, her smile tender and full of light. "I'm not marrying a cowboy," she said. "I'm marrying the man who gave me back my life." The wind moved gently across the fields, carrying the scent of rain and wildflowers. Inside the house, laughter echoed, soft and alive. Ethan pressed a kiss to her forehead, his voice a low promise against her skin. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cole." And for the first time in her life, Clara felt those words settle deep in her heart, steady, real, and forever.